Hey, welcome back to another JavaScript Jabber. This week on our panel, we have AJ O'Neill.
Yo, coming at you live from the winter wonderland of Utah. Well, at least we had our first frost that I noticed. The grass is all frozen.
Yeah. We also have Dan Shapir.
Hello from Tel Aviv, where here it's the first day of fall. We've essentially had the first day of rain. We're still wearing t-shirts though.
I'm Charles Max Wood from Top End Devs. Yeah, I had to scrape the car this morning. I didn't notice frozen grass. I don't live terribly far from AJ, so anyway, we have a special guest this week, and I am going to slaughter your name. I'm sorry, Danny. We have Danny Moerkerke. Did I get anywhere in the ballpark?
Yeah, somewhere around. It's Moerkerke. It's a pretty complicated name. It's Dutch, or it's Belgian actually, I think, but pretty good.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't speak Dutch or Flemish and very little French, so I don't know how it all breaks down. But yeah, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Discussing DOM access and browser APIs and some of the capacity the browser gives you for PWAs. Before we do that, do you want to just inform people a little bit more about who you are, what you do?
Yeah, of course. First of all, thanks for having me. I'm Danny Moerkerke. I'm from Amsterdam. I'm a freelance JavaScript or web developer, I should say. Started professionally around 2007, 2008, and been messing around with Atari home computers since I was a kid. I've done a lot of stuff. Worked a lot of time for the ING Bank in Amsterdam, where we pioneered web components. Did a lot of work on Polymer back then, and later with the Lit framework. Currently doing a lot with web components and progressive web apps. I'm the creator of What PWA Can Do Today, which you can find at whatpwacando.today. It's basically a showcase of what is possible with progressive web apps today. And the app is itself a PWA. So what you can do is you can install it to your own device and then see for yourself what is possible on your device and your platform. I also publish a weekly newsletter called the Modern Web Weekly, where I also write about web components and progressive web apps in general. You can also find me on Medium and on X.
So you're the guy who's still using web components?
I am the one, yeah. I heard I'm the only one who's still doing that.
Well, I don't know. I don't think you're the only one, to be fair.
No,
No, Jojo Byte does it too. That's at least two.
There've been a couple of those techno storms, debates, arguments, whatever you choose to call them, on X, and a relatively recent one was about web components yet again. I think it started with a post that our friend Ryan Carniato wrote, which was very, I wouldn't say dismissive, but a harsh critique, I think would be a better term, of web components. And then Rich Harris, another friend of ours, also joined the discussion, also very critical of web components. So yeah, probably need to get Alex Russell on the show again.
Yeah. Owen Buckley on YouTube says that there are dozens of people using it. The other thing that I'll throw in is that I've used a few libraries on my front end stuff that once I kind of cracked it open and peeked under the hood, it's like, oh, they're using web components in here, and I just didn't know. So there are a lot more people probably that just don't know they're using them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I don't want to derail us to web components, but that's the thing. The discussion wasn't so much how prevalent web components are on the web. Rather, it was about, do web developers these days, should they be using them? Do they like using them? Should they be using them if they're using some sort of framework such as React or Svelte or whatever? Yeah. I think that was the main conversation.
Yeah. There was a lot of criticism of web components because they don't really integrate quite well with the existing frameworks like Svelte. that Rich Harris built, and React in general. There are a lot of pain points with integrating web components into these frameworks because, like the standards are taking different routes. They have different APIs. So that was basically what the discussion was mostly about. And I can understand in one way that it's quite hard if you have an existing framework to integrate these components in there that are taking different routes. But I wouldn't say it is impossible. I personally work a lot with lit, which is also compiling down to raw vanilla web components, and that actually works quite well.
Yeah, but lit was specifically designed and built to work with web components. I think the majority of the criticism came indeed from the fact that other frameworks which were not specifically designed for web components are having a hard time integrating with them. I think that was the main source of criticism.
That was exactly it.
Also, a while back, micro frontends were all the rage, and then I completely stopped hearing about them. Now, I assume people are still implementing that pattern, but for some reason, nobody's really talking about micro frontends, at least not in my vicinity.
No, I don't hear too much about that either as well.
Anyway.
So
PWAs, also, yet again, I kind of paraphrase about PWAs that PWAs are the future, always have been, always will be.
Let's hope so.
No, but I mean, it's kind of a criticism because it means that PWAs might never arrive, because if they're always the future, it's the basic question is, can PWAs survive Apple's attitude towards them? That's the crux of the thing, really.
Yeah, I think that's the $1 million question right now. Yeah, it's like Apple is still actively frustrating the development of PWAs, or basically there's a lot of browser APIs that they still do not support on iOS. At least here in the EU, things are changing a little bit with the Digital Markets Act. There's at least some movement in the direction that Apple will be forced to change their ways, but that might take quite some time before that happens. If it will ever happen, I do think in the end it will, but it might take quite some time, just like with Microsoft in the 90s. But yeah, that is still a big issue, the lack of parity between the Android platform and the iOS platform. So that is still something that will need to change in order for PWAs to really be the future. Although I think it's not the only ones. I think we should also, hold up a mirror to ourselves as developers. This is also something that I write frequently about, is that we should also build better web apps. Because right now, if you look, there's so many web apps that their only job is to promote the native version of themselves. For example, if you go to LinkedIn nowadays, the first thing you see is like this big app banner that says, go to our native app, don't use our web app, go to our native app. And then the web app is just basically a dumbed down version of the native app, which is really unnecessary because a lot of stuff that these native apps can do, web apps can do just as well. Even worse, a lot of times when you go to a native version of some app, it doesn't offer you anything extra that the web app cannot do. So I think we as web developers should also stop just spitting out web apps that are only there to promote native apps and really start using these browser APIs that we have at our disposal nowadays.
To be fair, I don't think it's the developers. I think it's the marketing departments. The way that I like to put it is that when you're a web application, then on a mobile device, you're like a guest in a hotel. On the other hand, when you're a native application, it's like somebody renting the apartment. It's like a much more lasting and permanent relationship. The whole process of going to the store, downloading the app, installing it, getting an icon on the desktop, that's a much more permanent relationship, and that's what the marketing people want.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to be able to push notifications, which I'm not sure. Can you now do this on iOS or not? For a long
Yeah,
time,
you can.
For a
Yeah,
long
you
time,
can
you
now.
couldn't.
Yeah.
I really hope that changes the conversation. If iOS can do that, then maybe. But that's the thing. Now, what they're ignoring is the fact that people don't like installing apps. So you might prefer that people install your app, but the likelihood that they'll install your app is actually very low. So you should try to make the most of your shorter term web-based engagement that you have with them, and make them repeat visitors. And if what you built as a web app is a PWA, and the browser notices that you visit again and again, it will actually offer you to install an icon on your desktop. And like you said, you can now start sending push notifications. So it's actually a better way of getting onto the device. But I think that a lot of marketing managers just are not aware of this.
No, they are not. They are not, and I also see some role for developers in there to educate these marketing managers that these things are now available on the web. I mean, I can understand if you're not gonna move all your stuff from native apps right now to web apps, because you still have a lot of lack of support on iOS. But for example, if I look now at the PWAs that X and Instagram have, they have perfectly fine functioning PWAs until you turn off the network. When you try to make them work offline, it doesn't work anymore. You refresh the page, you get nothing. If you go to X on the native app, it will just keep giving you your feed. Of course, you won't have any new stuff, but you can still use it. On X, that's not the case, because if you turn down the network, or you disconnect the network and you try to start up the app, it won't not give you anything. There's nothing. So at least that's something that we that should be improved and that we can use right now.
Yeah, cache APIs and various storage APIs have been around for a long time on all platforms.
Yeah.
One other thing I just want to point out is that the mobile platforms have an incentive to make you go through the app store as well.
Oh yeah,
absolutely.
for sure.
Absolutely.
So that's just another reason why they may or may not be jazzed, I guess, about giving you the kind of support you want for PWAs.
Yeah, we spoke about this on several, I think, on an episode with Bruce Lawson, that we had him as a guest to talk about how mobile platforms and iOS in particular, Apple and iOS in particular, try to kind of stymie the whole concept of PWAs, just in order to preserve their store-based revenue stream. It's like it's like a 30% cut on every app-based purchase or something like that. That's insane. Why? It's billions of dollars. Why would they give it up as long as they have a choice?
Yeah, I think that's the main incentive for them, is just the revenue streams that they get from the app stores and the control that they have. I understand that they're not going to give it up like that. Yeah, let's hope maybe Apple and Google will find a new business model there with web apps. Maybe that will finally give them the incentive to move toward web apps. Or otherwise, I think it's only legislation that will force them in the end. I think that's the only way.
Maybe though it's worthwhile to backtrack a little bit and kind of explain the difference between a PWA and a regular old web app. Like what transforms a web app into a PWA?
Basically, there are two things that are like the pillars of a PWA, which is the manifest.json file, which is just a metadata file that describes the icons that will be added to your home screen whenever you install the app. You can also define other stuff in there. You can define the name in there. You can define the background color. In Chromium browsers, we also now have what they call the enhanced install UI. So what that means is whenever you go to a Chrome browser like Edge or Chromium or Opera, on the right in the address bar, when the app can be installed, when it has a manifest.json file, there's icons in there. You can click it and then you can install it to your device. You can also put some screenshots in there nowadays for Chromium browser. So whenever you click that button to install the app, you get a screen that is more like installing the UI that you get when you install a native app. So you can see a nice name there, you can see a description there, and you can see some screenshots that are different for desktop and mobile. Those are also the things that you can define there. You can define shortcuts also in the manifest.json file, which is, for example, on an Android device, if you push and hold the icon, then like a shortcut menu will pop up, and then you can go straight to some pages inside your PWA. Those are some of the things that you can define in the manifest.json file. And then the other thing is the service worker, which is a special kind of web worker that sits, as it were, between the network and your app. So what it can do, it can intercept network requests, and it can also cache. So it can cache assets like style sheet scripts, images, you name it. It can also cache whole pages. So whenever you install the web app, you can just give it a list of routes and URLs that it will then all visit, and then it will cache the resulting HTML or the image or the script or the style sheet or whatever. Then you can define a fetch handler in there that can just decide whenever you go to the network what it should do. So, for example, you can have it serve everything from the cache. And then it can, after that, you can do an additional request, for example, to get any stuff that is new. Or what you can do is, for example, you can let it always go to the network, and whenever that fails, it can serve content from the cache. The service worker also takes care of push notifications. So whenever, even when your device is, or when your app is not running, whenever a push notification arrives, the operating system will wake up the service worker, and then the service worker will take care of receiving the push notification and then showing a notification on your screen. Other stuff like background sync is also something that is doing. So, for example, if you have a form on your web app and the network is gone and you want to send the form, what it can do is that the service worker can intercept that request, that post request from the form. It can store it somewhere, maybe in IndexedDB. And then whenever the network comes back, there will be a sync event will be fired. And then the service worker can send that request. For example, I also use that for Google Analytics. So even when people are offline, I can get that analytics data there as well. And it can also do background fetch, which is very interesting for podcast apps, for example. So normally in a web app, when you download, when you download stuff in a web app and you close the web app, then your download is gone. But now with background fetch, that download can continue in the background. So you can just switch off your web app, the download will continue, and then whenever you activate it again, the download will be ready for you. So those are the two main things: the service worker that takes care of all the network stuff, that intercepts network requests and caches stuff for you, and the manifest.json file, which is the metadata file that describes the icons, the colors, the name, and stuff like that.
Okay, I want to jump in here because you kind of pushed a couple of my buttons, and I don't know if you knew this, but you did. So I have a couple of things that I'm kind of looking at, and this is specifically with the caching and the offline download. I can't remember what you call it, but so I've been wanting to give people better options for listening to podcasts. And I kept thinking, man, it sure be nice if it was just a PWA. And then we've discussed this on other stuff, but the technology that I typically use on the back end is Ruby on Rails. and they've got this nice turbo native, which you can wrap around a PWA, and it does PWA things. But even if I just wanted to do it in the browser, there's a way for me to have it download new episodes in the background and have them ready to go, so that if I'm offline and I'm going through the airport or whatever, I can still listen to those episodes on my device in airplane mode without internet and be good to go.
Yeah, exactly.
And similar to that, because I'm starting to put together training videos, and I'm getting into AI and starting to offer those videos, but I'm also looking at I want to do kind of comprehensive, like if you want a video that walks you through an API, like a web API or a browser API, or whatever, maybe I pick up something that's commonly used out there, like I don't know, but it walks through, hey, these are all the APIs. Similarly, if somebody's interested, they can say, I want to be able to watch these ones offline, and then it can go and it can have those ready to go. And again, they can just browse to the website on their browser, and it'll just play them, even though they're not connected to the internet, because it actively pulled it in when they were.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what you can do. So basically what it does is the service worker takes care of that. There's a couple of events there, like I don't know the exact name. It's background sync start or something, whatever. And it will download the things in the background. If you go to what PWA can do today, there's also a demo there that just downloads a lot of stuff. I think it's from Jake Archibald from some of his podcasts. I just did that to make it really take a long time. So in the meantime, you can play with it. For example, if you have an Android device, it doesn't work on iOS yet, although it should be coming because it's already in Safari Tech Preview. In the feature flags, you can enable it. It's there, but it's not functional yet. So it should be coming to iOS as well in the near future. Then you can see in the messages center, or whatever it's called in Android, you can just see the download continuing, and you can pause it. You can go to flight mode, and then it will stop. And even if it's running in the background and you go back to the app, you can see that after a few seconds the progress will pick up. So it will just continue. If it's still downloading, you can see the progress also progressing. And basically what it does is whenever that download is finished, it will be presented to the web app as a response. And then that response can be put in the browser cache. So that is basically how that works. It's a very simple system. And yeah, that really enables exactly what you're looking for. So you can download whatever you want in the background while the web app is not running.
That's awesome.
Really,
all the audio only people, I'm making all kinds of happy gestures and movements and smiles. I'm super excited about this. So,
and by the way, I'm clicking around on the site right now, just kind of testing things out, and I'm actually kind of surprised at some of the stuff that's supported. I'll have to try it in Firefox and mobile Safari to see if this is real. Is this all evergreen stuff? Is this baseline stuff, or is some of this still experimental?
No, not everything. If you look at the, for example, there's a one with the screen capturing, which is quite experimental. These are a couple of the what they call origin trials in Chromium. So that's Chromium only. That's the screen capturing, and the element capture, which enables you, for example, to do a screen recording of a certain DOM element. And then there's also the stuff that Apple just blatantly refuses to implement, like Bluetooth and NFC, stuff like that. I don't know if that will ever come.
Okay. I was really impressed that I typed it in and I hit enter, and I could tell instantly you were not using React because the page loaded when I hit enter. So that was great. And then I could also tell you weren't using React because when I click on a button, the URL changes, and when I click back, the back button works. So I'm pretty stoked on this.
Good. Yeah, I'm currently using a what do you call it? A skeleton. So it just uses or it loads the HTML quite quickly. It's still a single page app, but I really want to move it to a multi-page app as soon as the cross document view transitions are all ready. They're already working also in Safari Tech Preview right now. Basically, the only reason it's a single page app right now is because I wanted to have those sliding transitions on mobile. And the only way to do that when I started building this was to do it as a single page app and have both pages in the DOM and then do some animations. But now
this is beautiful. I think so.
Thanks.
I wish that there was something, basically some boilerplate, like some copy paste boilerplate that somebody uses this as a template for how to start their web app. Because I mean, just no website works anymore, and this works. Like everything that I click, it responds instantly. There's an animation or a transition to let me know that my click was responded to. I mean, this is like using the web in 1995, but with flat design as if it was in 1985.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, if I had a euro for every time somebody asked me to open source it, I would be a millionaire by now. But I really want to do it. But the thing is that the code is not. Yeah, I think it's a bit messy and it's pretty integrated with Amazon. It runs on AWS. So I am thinking of starting a boilerplate for people to really start up a PWA. What I did do in the meantime, on my GitHub page, there is a project called Basic Service Worker, which is just a service worker that enables you to make your web app work offline. Because I think that's really the baseline that web apps should have. And there's so many web apps that just do not work offline. And I think any web app should work offline nowadays.
What you should do, I think, now maybe this already exists and maybe Fred can chime in and tell us it exists, but I would look to integrate something like that with Astro. Astro is multi-page and not single page, so they support view transitions between the pages in their framework. So having really good offline support with Astro, I think, would really open up a lot of interesting possibilities for a lot of developers.
I'm using Stimulus and I'm looking at the same kinds of things. It's like, oh, how much of this can I tie in? Because again, Stimulus is lightweight, and inside your controllers, you can call into any of these APIs. I'm
for
curious.
Sure. Just to say, Chuck, just to say, it's so. Yeah, to emphasize the fact that Danny kind of stated it, but it really needs to be emphasized that it's so easy to transition from a plain old web application to a PWA. Basically, all you need is a JSON file, which is the manifest. How hard is it to do a JSON file? And the service worker, we've been talking about all the sophisticated things that service workers can do, but you can also have a really dumbed down service worker that's basically pass through, and there are examples of this on the web, and just add that, and you're done. It's a PWA, and then you can start adding all the sophisticated bells and whistles.
Yeah, I was going to ask too. So on all the demos on what PWA can do today, I mean, these are all just using straight up browser APIs and DOM APIs, right? There's no library or special this or that you have to pull in. It's
no. There's nothing really there. It's just basic vanilla JavaScript. I think the only thing is I think I used 3D.js for one of these demos. I have to look it up. I think it's in the orientation or the motion demo. Oh yeah, it's in the device orientation demo. If you look on that on a mobile device, there's a nice textured cube there. That's what I used 3D.js for, but I don't even. Yeah, I think I could even do that myself. Really not that hard, but the rest is no framework, nothing. It's just browser APIs. Like I said, the service worker and the manifest.json file. But it's funny that you mentioned then the integration with Astro. At my time at ING, I did look a little bit into Astro, but I'm not even sure if we need any specific integration for that, because the service worker itself is just a separate web worker file that probably doesn't even need any integration with the framework.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's just that if you make the whole process seamless for Astro developers, that would immediately provide benefit for a lot of developers. That's all I'm saying. Obviously,
Yeah.
at the technological level, you don't really need anything because, like you said, the service worker is basically just a JavaScript file. Astro is basically just a web server. It,
Yeah.
that's you don't need much in the way of integration to get web servers to deliver JavaScript files.
Yeah, but it's interesting. I'll have a look at that to see what I can do over there. It's the main thing about the service worker that people always struggle with is like the life cycle management of it, and also the way if something goes wrong in your service worker, it can go really rough sometimes.
But
And
I
also
think that was mostly fixed, though. It used to be that if you got a bug in your service worker, you could literally get into a situation where you would need to call your visitors and ask them to reload the page or clear the thing in the dev tool or something. But I think they fixed that.
Yeah, I don't even think there was a fix needed on the platform level, but I could be wrong. You can always just put a no-op service worker in there. But the thing is that people, whenever they go to your web app, they need to get that service worker, which is mainly the hardest thing. So what I did in this basic service worker project I have on GitHub is that I made sure that the service worker can update as soon as possible, and it also actively checks if there are any new versions of that service worker. And then I also use like page events, like page height and all stuff like that. So whenever right before you close it, it will check. And then the next time you open it and the service worker is already down there, it's installing, it will be activated straight away whenever that is possible. It won't be possible if somebody has like multiple tabs with your web app open, because that would be very messy.
So we mentioned a couple of the items on the list here. It's worthwhile to mention a couple of more. So we've got geolocations in here, notifications we already talked about, various forms of capture we've already talked about, vibration, barcode detection, web share, payments. What is the payment API? What can it do?
The payment API is just integrates with Google Pay and Apple Pay. So if you just go there, it's just a very simple demo. You can just click the button, and then you will see in Chrome, you will see a Google Pay screen coming up with $1 just for demo. And whenever you open it in iOS, you will see the Google Pay, the Apple Pay screen. So what you can do there is just call the APIs for those specific things and have a payment done in your app. So it integrates with that. It's also a browser API, but then you can pick if you want to do it with Chrome Pay or Apple Pay, and that will just completely integrate with that.
And we've got speech synthesis, speech recognition, wake lock, which means that you can get your phone to unlock.
No, it prevents your screen from locking, which is which is also something like I love to cook. My wife loves to cook, so I regularly get recipes on my phone. And then whenever your hands are dirty, you want to scroll through the recipe or you want to do something else.
And then speaking my language, my friend.
I run
into this all the time.
Yeah, me too. And then the screen just goes off. That's the thing. None of these sites use this, and it's so easy, so simple to use. It's just a couple of lines of code, and that will make your recipe website stay on. It will keep the screen on, which is, if you're a cook, if you're cooking and your hands are dirty, that's really something you need. But they don't use it. It's
My solution to this is I call my 8-year-old over. Okay, can you unlock my screen now?
Yeah.
Push these buttons.
I do that too with my daughter. Yeah.
Yeah.
But coming back, like you said, AJ, like you were surprised that a lot of stuff is already supported. I hear that so often by web developers saying, "Oh, I had no idea that this was supported," because people don't know that, and that's also why I write about this, is to educate people about what is possible nowadays with web apps, because a lot of developers really have no idea of what is already supported. So that's also the reason they don't use this stuff, because they don't know about it.
So I guess my question on this is, how much of this stuff is, like, I'm looking at the wake lock, for example, and okay, so it's under the navigator stuff. So you really, it's already there. You just have to run it. How much of this stuff requires you to have that service worker, and how much of this stuff is just kind of part of the DOM API?
Let me see. I think the service worker is only for the let me see, for background.
Anything that requires network, basically.
Yeah. No, not even that. Basically, the background fetch API, for example, to download stuff in the background.
Yeah.
That's what needs a service worker. The background sync as well, although you could polyfill that. The background sync, what it does is you can whenever there is, for example, you want to send out some message. Let's say that you have an email client and you want to send out an email. What you can do with background sync is to create like this outbox functionality. So what you can do is you can send it straight. You can send it to an outbox, and whenever you are online, it will go from the outbox. It will be sent immediately. But when you are offline, it will go to the service worker, and then the service worker will take care of sending it whenever the network is back. But that's also something you can polyfill with the online and offline events. You won't have the granular control that you have with background sync.
Also the limitation
payments.
that the web page would need to be open and in focus, whereas with the service worker it can work even if your web page is closed.
That's another thing. Yeah, that also the sync will also be raised when it's not. No, I don't think so with the background sync.
No, what I mean is with background sync, with using a service worker, the web page doesn't need to be open. Like, whereas if you're just using the online offline events in the page itself, obviously the page needs to be open in order for it to work.
So what you're saying is that whenever I register a sync, something that needs to be done whenever the network is back. So when I close the PWA and then the networks come back, that task will be executed.
Might be. And I need to, I haven't played with it. You're the PWA expert, but that would be like the whole idea of a service worker is the fact that you've got code that is running. Like PWA basically serves two purposes, really. First of all, it's a proxy between the page and the network. So it gives you a lot of control over what goes through the network, what comes from the cache. It gives you a lot of caching capabilities that are otherwise not available. And the fact that it continues to run or can run when the page is closed, which means that it can do background things even when the page is closed, even theoretically when the browser app is not in the focus, like the background sync, like sending push notifications.
I have to admit, I didn't even try that yet with the background sync, like having some sync registered and then closing the PWA and then reconnecting the network. So that's interesting. I'm going to try that tonight. I didn't even try that yet. That's a very good remark. So
his mad scientist costume on for Halloween and then try it.
Yeah. No, that's really good. That's really good, actually. Other than that, it's only the notifications that will need a service worker. But like the rest, I'm quickly scanning through it. All the other stuff is just basically workable even without a service worker.
Right, because it's either DOM or browser, and it doesn't need the network.
No, it doesn't really need the network. No.
Yeah,
So
it's a huge shame that all this API is there. It's available. A lot of it is even supported by Safari, and yet the web developers hardly ever use it for
Yeah,
some
exactly.
reason.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I
so
think it's a combination of people not being aware of this, that this stuff is available. And whenever they need something or functionality like this, I think they will be quicker to go to a native app and
Hmm.
build that, and
The
then
co- the
instead of a web app.
company the company might go to a native app, but the actual developer, I mean, there are a lot of people who are web developers and don't really have much experience in building native applications. Me, for example.
Hmm.
Obviously I can go and learn it. It's not the end of the world, but it's effort. And if I can get the same functionality using technologies that I'm very familiar with, then it's a win.
yeah,
It
but
is.
the point is that a lot of this stuff that's on what PWA can do today. I'm trying to. It's a jumble of letters in front of my face, and so I struggle to read it. But a lot of these I didn't know were there, and so it wouldn't even occur to me to try to do it with my application, if that makes sense. But I mean, like a barcode detection, right? I would have gone out and I would have found some library that would have, magicked it in, but it's like, oh well. Anyway,
Yeah.
so one other thing, and yeah, now we're getting into kind of the noob questions. Is so let's say that I want to put this in to my application, and I mentioned that like the background sync and the background fetch and some of this other stuff is some of what I'm interested in. Those require a service worker. How do I set one up? Is it just, is there just an API for that I just, call, and then how do I tell it how to connect to the back end to respond? And then finally, what does that response look like?
Yeah. So basically, what you need is a script, so a separate script, which is a service worker. And like I said, it's a special kind of web worker. And what it consists of, I already mentioned the life cycle of a service worker. So what it goes through whenever a web page is loaded and it finds a service worker script, it will load that script. The service worker will then start to install itself. So basically what you do is you define an event handler for the install event. So it's really a simple event handler that you put in there for the install event. And then you can call the cache API, which is cache add. So or cache add all. You can just give it an array of URLs. That's all you need to give it. Let's say you have a couple of scripts, you have a couple of images, you have a couple of style sheets. You all put the URLs to those files into the array. And then let's say you also have some HTML routes that don't end in a .html file. You can also give that to the service worker. And then when the service worker starts to install, it will run that install event handler. And inside that event handler, it will add all those. It will fetch all the stuff it needs, like the assets, style sheets, whatever you put in there. It will fetch that. It will fetch the pages, and then it will put a response object into the browser cache. And I'm not talking about the cache that the browser uses for the network, but it's really like it's a property on the window object. And then after that, whenever that is finished, that install phase, it will go to the activate phase. And in that phase, you can, for example, remove some old caches, for example. One of the best practices is to always version it. So I always put like a version variable in my service worker, and then I attach that to the name of the cache, which can be anything you want. And then what you can check for other caches that are still there, like for a previous service worker, you can delete them, and then you can add, or you can start up. You can even create an index DB or something like that if you have to serve other stuff. And then after that, you need a fetch handler, which is also a simple event handler. So whenever a network request is done, the service worker will raise a fetch event, and then the event handler for that will handle the network requests. And then inside that, you can just do basically whenever you want. You can, let's say, you can serve other pages if you want. You can serve offline pages. You can decide if you want to serve everything from the cache, or if you want to serve everything from the network, or maybe something in between, whatever. So basically, it's just a lot of scripts and a lot of event handlers that you use for that. Like, for example, a push notification is also an event that is raised. So you put an event handler for the push event. The background fetch is also an event, and background sync, they're all events. So a lot of it is just event based.
Like I said, the easiest, I think, way to think about it is as a proxy, but instead of running somewhere out in the cloud, it's running locally on your device. Mm-hmm. So all the network goes through that, and it has total insight into the actual content going back and forth, and it can pretty much do whatever it wants with the requests that are for the page's own domain. That's important to note. So if you're making requests to third-party stuff, that does not go to the service worker.
It does.
It does go to the service worker?
Yeah. It does. I think what you're referring to is that the service worker can only control its own domain. It cannot control any other domains. There are some developments right now where you can
confused on that. Sorry.
Yeah. So, for example, what you can do is, if you have Google Analytics, for example, I always had that when it was trying to fetch the Google Analytics script, that it would just give an error, and then it wouldn't work offline anymore because it would give an error. So what I did at a certain point, I would just fetch the script and also store that in the browser cache. So if you have third-party scripts, you can also cache those, and then the service worker can also serve those while you are offline. And that's very important because, if you want your app to work offline and there is like an error in there, and the worst thing is if you have an error in your index pages, like the first page that it serves. If there's something wrong in there, it won't work. It will give you an error. It won't serve the page, and your whole offline functionality is gone.
Yeah, this is one of those really annoying things. Like, for example, if I go on a flight and, I'm reading something interesting at the airport just before the flight, boards, and then I bought the flight and I want to keep on reading, but because I switch between apps or something, the browser decides it has to reload the tab, and it can't because I'm in airplane mode or whatever, and that's gone. And you're thinking, hey, it's just text. Why can't I see what was there before? But I can't. And with Service Worker, it's so easy.
It is. Yeah, it happens to me all the time as well. I use Safari browser to put it in the reading list, and it always, or like 9 times out of 10, it just refreshes for no reason, and then it's not stored right or something. I don't know. But yeah, that's like you said, it's another very nice use case for a service worker. Just put a button on your pages if you haven't already cached them, and then put a button like read offline or something. That's also something that you can do with a service worker.
Yeah, it's interesting because so topenddevs.com, for example, it uses import maps, right? And so a lot of the scripts are being pulled from CDN somewhere instead of being loaded up by my own domain. And so what you're telling me is that it can capture and cache those so that, when somebody comes back around, the page still works, even though that's third-party stuff. The other example I'm thinking of is I've played with the idea, and this is on another app that I built several years ago, played with the idea of allowing people to essentially put together their own podcast feeds out of other third-party audio. And so, for example, the idea was to put a plugin into like Chrome And so then I'm on this page. It has some audio or video that I want to add to this feed. And so I can, click something in there, but then it would load it up on the page for the actual app. And so what you're telling me is I can cache those too, even though I'm not hosting them and they're not under my own domain.
Yeah. You can just fetch it. You can let the service worker fetch anything you want, and then store the response object in the browser cache. That's really no problem. Another thing, what I also use it for, I can also put that in the chat, by the way. Another demo app that I built some time ago is that also uses a readable stream. So, and that's something that I started working on again, because now with the cross-document view transitions, this could be very handy. If you have cross-document view transitions, you need to make sure that your pages load very fast, because otherwise, if you click a button or you click a link and you have a transition and it takes like 2 seconds, that really doesn't look good. So a couple of years ago, I put it in the chat now, it's also a demo app, very simple, that uses a readable stream to serve the responses. So what it does is everything is split out in a header, a footer, and a content. And then what the browser or what the service worker does is it intercepts all the requests. And then what it does, it streams the response back to you. It stitches it back together from the header, the content, and the footer. And that allows you to have a multi-page app that is, well, nearly as fast as a single-page app, because it streams the content to the browser, and then the browser streaming parser, which is insanely fast, can stream everything. And you can basically have a multi-page app with a service worker that's just as fast as a single-page app.
It sounds a lot like what Turbo does.
I think it's similar. I heard that term before. Yeah, I think they also do something like that. Yeah.
If we can get some of our listeners to just try out this stuff, go into your page, browse around, try it out, get inspired, and actually try it out, I think we've done our duty for the web.
That would be wonderful. Yeah. That's also what I consider my job, to educate people on what is available, what you can already do with web apps today, because there is so much that you can already do. I mean, even if you don't want a PWA, you don't want people to install your app, really with an icon to their home screen, at least make sure that your app works offline, that when, whenever they go to you, and not even, because people, they tell me, I have this chat app and there's no point for it to work offline, because you cannot chat when you are offline. Of course you can, but I've been in so many situations, you're in a parking garage, or in a building, or you're in some rural area where you just do not have a network, maybe for 30 seconds or a couple of minutes. I mean, that is my definition of offline. It's not like totally offline, but it's for those situations where people have a bad network, they're in a parking garage or something. You should make sure that your web app also works in those conditions, and that they don't get this ugly dinosaur screen that tells them that they're offline. There's really no need for that. It's not something that native apps do, and that web apps shouldn't do either, I think. So at least get the service worker running.
Well,
you've got let's say a user filling this big form, and then clicks submit or something, and because they're walking around, so I don't know, they moved between 2 cell towers or something, and they lost connectivity for a second or two, that shouldn't kill that form submit.
No, exactly. But that's what happens all the time.
Well, the other thing is, you're talking about a chat or something that maybe it might be time sensitive. You could also simply just put some intelligence around it, right? Because at this point, it's just JavaScript calling an API in your browser. Says, hey, you were offline for more than 5 minutes. Do you still want to push this chat post?
Yeah. For example, you could maybe store a couple of messages and then send them later. Might not always make sense, but that's at least something that you can do. And also, when you have a service worker, you already have all your assets cached and people are on a bad network, they don't need to download that anymore because it's already there.
Mm-hmm.
So they
Oh
can
yeah,
use that. Yeah.
that's completely true, but I want to emphasize that even though you get fine-grained, granular control over caching with service worker, that's not a justification to not put proper cache headers on your stuff.
Oh,
So,
Of course, no, you
yeah.
should always, of course, yeah, of course. But what I mean is that if you are on a bad network and people already visited your app one time, that the assets are already there, so they don't need to download these again. So you can use that little network that you have. You can use it for more important stuff.
mhm. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
that's what I meant.
The
Yeah.
amount of times that let's say I'm at the airport, I'm late for I'm late for my flight, or I'm worried that I'll be late for my flight, but I'm overseas on a data plan, connectivity is shitty. I try to check what's going on, and I'm having frustrating problems trying to get the airline website to load. That's happened too often.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I had the same thing. I was in the last weekend. I was with my wife at IKEA to pick up something. So we were at the pickup point down in the parking garage, and then I wanted to. I was checking my newsletter. I got a couple of new subscriptions, so I wanted to go to the member list, and I had to do some filtering. So I click the filter button, and then this dialog screen comes up, but it's empty. There's not even a button there to close it. So I was there for 2 minutes with this filter screen that blocks like more than half of the screen, and I couldn't even click it away because it was still loading all the stuff. It was loading everything that is inside. Of course, this is just bad programming. They should have put the button already there and at least tested it on a slow network. But if you already have that, framed out with a service worker, that stuff wouldn't happen.
I have to say that again, going to our initial conversation about native apps versus web apps, even without the PWA stuff, a lot of times web apps are just better. For example, I've seen a lot of news apps that when you go to, let's say, some news article, until they load everything, they show nothing. So until it finishes downloading the largest ad or something, you basically can't read anything. And this is
Yeah.
something the web has solved like ages ago. So it's so frustrating. Sometimes I just wish that that instead of using their native app, I could just use their web app, because sometimes you can, but a lot of cases you can't,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is frustrating.
Yeah. I do the same thing. Sometimes I just refuse to go to the native app. But for example, the other day I also write articles on Medium. So the other day somebody responded to one of my articles, and then I was sitting on the couch at home with my phone, and I wanted to respond, but I couldn't do it because then you have to go to the native app, which is I think it's about 84.5 megabytes just to fill out a form to write a comment, which is simply not, of course, it's possible, but it's something that they want you to download the native app for, which is ridiculous, of course. But that also feeds the idea, I think, to end users and maybe to developers to a certain extent that web apps are just bad. They're inferior. They're not as good as native apps, which is, of course, not true. But because a lot of stuff is in native apps that is not in web apps, while it could be, or maybe it's deliberately not there, people really get the idea that web apps are inferior, and that's really a shame, I think, because it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
So are there any things that the native apps do that the PWAs don't? Like, and I'm even talking about experience things like, for example, your web app does have to say ask for permission to use your camera and microphone before it works, as opposed to in a native app it just kind of does it without asking you.
Yeah. Yeah, those are a couple of things. Well, for example, I think the main thing that hinders web app is the install experience, and that's also something that Apple Apple refuses to implement properly. There is a browser API that allows you to trigger that install screen. And like I said before, in Chromium browsers, you can even have like a better screen with screenshots and a description and the name of the app, all the nice stuff that makes it look more like you're installing a native app. Apple doesn't do that. You have to go to the share screen and scroll all the way down, and then there's this add to home screen button. I think that's the main thing that hinders us. But for the rest, yeah, it's stuff like I think there's a couple of background. I think native apps can do some more stuff in the background. I'm working also on a WebRTC app that you can. It's a bit like WhatsApp, that you can make calls to each other. That's something a web app cannot do. You cannot have like a somebody is calling you screen. The whole screen is lighting up. Just like you have when somebody calls you. That's something you cannot do. And then, of course, there's a lot of bugs, things that don't really work well, especially on iOS. That is also hindering us.
iOS is the thing. Let's put it this way: if iOS, forget about adding new features and capabilities. If iOS just achieved sufficient parity with what Chrome already provides on Android, I would be a happy camper.
Yeah, me too. But still, there is a lot of stuff that you can already use in web apps that is still underused, like all the APIs I'm showing here now that can already be used across platforms.
And one more thing important to note: a lot of these APIs, you don't need to be a PWA to do them.
Exactly.
Everything having to do with the background, you need a service worker. If you want to get added to the home screen on a mobile device, you need the manifest. But if you just want to do something with audio or video, you don't need to be a PWA for that.
Not at all. You really don't need any stuff to be a PWA like that. Like you said, it's really the background stuff and the notifications that you really need to be that you need to have it installed for. But for the rest, you can use everything. I can understand that companies that have a native app right now are not going to bet their whole business on a web app when the install experience for iOS and Android is that different. I can understand they don't want to do that, but besides that, there is all the stuff that you can already use in a web app, and that it doesn't even need to be a PWA for. So it's really a shame that it's so underused, all this stuff.
Yep.
So that's basically what I'm trying to do, to educate people and show them what is possible. I regularly post screen recordings as well on X when I take one of these demos and then run it on a device, make a recording of it, and then show what can be done. Just to educate people and show them what is already possible and what they should be using.
Yep.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar, for example, with the APIs for screen capture and element capture. That's really cool.
Yeah, it is. But I have to say those are quite experimental still. So
we're recording this on StreamYard, and StreamYard does that, right? Where if you hit the button, right, you can share your screen. So is that not that API that they're using here?
I don't think so. I think with WebRTC, you have the ability to just capture screen. But if you want to capture specific elements on the page, I think that's more sophisticated.
Okay, so
I'm not aware of being able to capture screens with WebRTC without the browser API. Are you?
To be honest, I'm not exactly certain how it works, but obviously you've got it in StreamYard, you've got it in Google Meet. So there are quite a number of applications.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, in a web app, you will always need to have this. It's called get display media. So navigator media devices dot get display media. that you can use to get like a screen or a browser tab or like a whole display. You can also limit that with the options that you can set, but you will always need that browser API to be able to share something, to get a video stream of a program or a tab or the whole screen. You will always need that. But then, yeah, you could do something like, for example, you can take that video stream that you get from whatever you are sharing and then put it on the canvas, and then maybe limit it or crop it or whatever. That's also something that I've been playing with lately. But to really, get like a specific thing, like with the element capture, that's really what you need Chrome for right now. And a lot of this stuff is, like I said, it's still experimental in the sense that those are origin trials. So you really need to get like an API key to activate it. So it's just a meta tag that you put on your in your web app, and then it will be activated there. But it's not activated by default in these browsers. And then usually
I'm supposing that's so that they can contact you when they change it or remove it, to let you know, hey, we're about to break your site or something.
No, they're not. They're not going to contact you. It's really to activate it in. So it's really just a meta tag with a name and a long API key, a long string that you have to put there, and then the API will be activated. And you basically what they use it for is to test out stuff and to gather feedback from developers. So you can give feedback.
You know, the basic issue with the web is that once something is in, it can never be removed. Now, in the past, they've tried to do things by, let's say, prefixing things with browser names like the WebKit stuff or stuff like that. And what it ended up being is that those things had to be backward supported as well. So they essentially landed on these origin trials as the only mechanism that seems to work to give developers the ability to test things out without being like tied down to a particular implementation, and being able to either change the APIs or even totally remove APIs if it turns out that they were bad ideas.
Yeah, exactly. And Edge is doing something similar. They have their own origin trials, but then whenever there's an origin trial in Chromium, that also works in Edge. So you can, just activate it and play with it. It's not guaranteed that they will stay those. Sometimes they have like origin trials that end and then they don't come back, or they only come back when they've done some refining or technical stuff, and then they come back. And sometimes they don't. They think it's not worth it, or maybe the API is too difficult. I think it also happened with view transitions long ago, or there was some different name for it. It wasn't called view transitions, but that was also in the origin trial. I was also playing with it, and then it went away, and then it came back under the name view transitions. And now it's widely supported. So that's basically what they use it for.
Very cool. We're kind of getting toward the end of the time that we scheduled, but I want to make sure that we've given everything a fair hearing. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that people might be interested to know?
Maybe quickly some APIs that are now available. Like we haven't discussed the file system API. Just quickly, it enables you at least on desktop to access the actual file system of the device. So on desktop, you can just create files there, read files there. You can browse through your whole file system. And then on mobile, it's not available. It may be in the future, but right now you only have the origin private file system, which is like a virtual file system. So it will not correspond to so-called physical files on your disk. It might be in a database or whatever. But it's also something that Photoshop on the web uses, because it's very optimized for very fast reading and writing. But from the perspective of your web app, it just looks like a file system. So that's a very nice one. And there's also the authentication. The demo in what PWA can do today is a bit boring because I haven't really found a nice way to show it off. But the web authentication, the web authent for sure, it enables passwordless authentication. So you can just have Face ID or Touch ID, fingerprints to log into your web app, which is, unfortunately also still an underused one, but a very nice one.
Well, for the first 10 years, it was useless. It's only in the last 18 months or so that the APIs have become stable. And even still, the documentation out there is horrible. And to understand what it is, what it does, and the simple way to use it, and many companies are capitalizing on this to try to push you through their SaaS platform. But there is a way, there is a way to just, you call it with a couple of options. It generates a signed key. You send it off to the server. It verifies it with a public key, and you're done. It can be very simple, but it's not marketed as very simple. It's certainly not profitable for any of these companies that are doing the auth stuff to show you how to do it in a simple way, because they want to show you the complex way, so you get roped into their subscription. So that one's a tragedy. In a lot of, and most of the features don't work or unreliably. Like it seems to have been built around the idea of trusted platform computing. So there's a whole bunch of stuff with attestations and keys and AGUIDs and all, but none of it's useful at all. You can't rely on any of it because the reality of is that any government can just spoof any of those things, because they could just open up a YubiKey and get the private key out. They just use the X-ray machine and soldering, and so it doesn't provide. If you're trying to log a user into their email and it's just a Joe Schmo or their Twitter or whatever, yeah, it's great. But the authentication mechanism is great no matter what, because what it is it's just better than a password. But a lot of the advanced features, if you look into it, the enterprise features, none of them could be trusted at the level of a government, because you can't trust that the hardware is unmodified.
Yeah, I haven't looked into it that deep, but I have to say that I was playing with the automatic upgrade to a passkey. So whenever you log into a website and then the browser autofills your credentials, then you should be able to upgrade to a passkey. But that was I still haven't figured out how that is supposed to work. And like you said, the documentation is very sparse around this.
Yeah. I'll link a demo. I've got passkeys.js.org, and I'm gonna get the documentation for this in a better state, but I'll just throw that out there, because I spent a ton of time on this. One of my clients is moving to passkeys, and we wanted to get it in a way that would work reliably, and we ran into a couple of problems, and it ends up being really, really simple with very few caveats, but the path to learn it was frustrating. But you've got your demo there, and I've got mine in the Git source. I'm going to be linking to more and better documentation as I firm this up for them. But it's something where it's like, I want to tell people go use this, but I don't yet have the resource to point them to that shows, okay, you follow these steps and you're done.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and push us to picks. Now, for those of you who are new to the podcast, picks are just things we're shouting out about. We try and keep them short, try and keep them interesting, and I will let Dan go first.
Excellent. So I've got two picks today. My first pick is a movie that we watched. It's a movie from 2000, and it's actually a movie from this year, although it seems that it came out last year originally. It's called Knox Goes Away. It's starring Michael Keaton, who also, I think, directed the movie. Yes, I see that he did. It's crime, thriller, drama sort of thing, but it's just an excellent movie. I don't want to start telling what it's about because I'll probably spoil it. So I'm going to say that, just watch it if you can. My wife and I both watched it, and we both enjoyed it very, very much. It's just an excellent movie. So that would be my first pick. My second pick is I make it a point on social media to kind of separate between my technical views and opinions and posts and my, let's call them, political or commentary or social posting. So on X, it's almost all technical. Sometimes I respond to stuff, but I don't just post political stuff. I make a point of it. But on Quora, it's actually kind of the other way around. There, most of my posts are about, what's going on, as it were. So if you're interested in that part of me, you can check out my account. I'll post a link in the show notes to it. Um, just as a point of interest, turns out that my account is relatively popular there. Just in the past week, I've got something like almost 100,000 views there and something like almost 1,000 upvotes. So, some people enjoy what I write. If you're interested, check it out, and I'd appreciate the feedback. And those would be my picks for today.
Awesome. How about you, AJ?
Well, I'm linking to both the Passkeys demo and the Passkeys presentation that I gave because I do really like Passkeys. I just wish I had like I said, a way to say, here's the quick and easy path, and I'll have that. I'll have it. It will come, but I just don't quite have it yet. But the presentation, I kind of go through I go through the happy path, but I also explain a lot of the pitfalls and stuff as well. But anyway, yeah. Then I also want to pick Sabine Hassenfelder. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that. Sabine. I think that, yeah.
Yeah.
She is totally getting red pilled, little by little. I've watched her videos over the past year, and she is uncovering more and more and more. She's a physicist over in I'm assuming by her accent that she's in Europe, but maybe
she's German. She's German.
Yeah, but does she currently live in Germany? Or
well, I'm not sure where she lives right now, but she studied and worked in Germany, as I recall.
Yeah, so she's a top physicist, or she seems to be a top physicist, and she's been on some of the long form podcast sites. Anyway, she got tons of great videos. Some of them I agree with, some of them I disagree with, but I've just been loving. Well, it's terrible because she's getting so depressed over the last few months as more and more stuff comes out with hoaxes in scientific papers, and the foil is getting peeled back.
It's worse than that. Hoaxes are certain people being dishonest. The bigger issue is, based on my understanding of what she's saying, is that she's kind of seeing the current situation in physics as basically the death of physics. It's like physics, the field of physics, in her opinion, or at least theoretical physics, has kind of run into a wall. And she has a very pessimistic and cynical viewpoint of how this field is progressing, or should I say regressing. For example, I don't know if you know this, but the 2 Nobel Prize winners for physics this year aren't physicists.
Yeah, she covered one of those.
Yeah, they basically got the Nobel in physics for their work on AI, on neural nets. They were like the pioneers of neural networks or something like that. And it's kind of strange that, the Nobel Prize in physics doesn't go to physicists.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Anyway, my point is, I really like her channel. I think that I think it's just about anybody who's interested in that sort of stuff could like it, because her viewpoints are varied. She's not towing a specific party line. She is letting herself explore, and she'll criticize one thing one month and then come back and say I was wrong the next month. Or well, normally she is pro something one month and comes back and criticizes the next month. But anyway, yeah. So I want to throw her channel out there because I've been watching it, and I learn a lot, and I'm very interested to see her, critique a video from a year ago or from 2 years ago or whatever. And that's anyway, that's what I got. So passkeys are great. There is a happy path. It doesn't have to be complicated. I just don't have the blog post to point it to yet. And then Sabina for her physics videos and just her takes on things that are going on in the realm of science.
Cool. I'm going to throw in some picks of my own, and then we'll get some from Danny here. So the first one is I always do a board game pick. The last time I got together with my friends, we played a rousing round of the game. We played a couple of rounds, actually. The game is essentially, it's a really simple game. Board Game Geek weights it at 1.24, which means it's a really simple game.
It's called the game?
It's called the game. And it's a card game.
It's kind of like the band.
Sure. There's another variation on it, and I can't remember what it's called, but it's got some other simple name like that. But you have cards that number from 1 to 100. You've got 4 sets, 1 to 100. And so you start with 4 piles. There are other ways to vary this, but you start with 4 piles, 2 that start with 1 and 2 that start with 100. I guess it's just 2 sets. 1 to 100. Anyway, so then what you're doing is you're trying to make the cards either count up from 1 or down from 100, and you're trying to discard all the cards onto those piles, moving up or down, and you can jump backward, right? So if you're counting up, you can jump down by exactly 10, and if you're counting down from 100, you can jump up by exactly 10, and if you can manage to discard all the cards out of your hands playing in turns, and it's just you have so many cards in your hand and so many cards you're playing, you win. And so anyway, it's kind of a nice game that we can kind of sit back and chat while we play. And there was a lot to talk about this last time, and so we were having an interpersonal talk while we figured out what to do. And sometimes you can there's a little bit of table talk that you can do. You can't tell people what numbers you have, and you can't give hints that specifically tell them what numbers you have. But you can tell them, for example, I would like to play on this pile, right? And so then the other players, unless they don't have any other good plays, will try and leave that pile alone, or things like that. And so you try and give people clues as to what you can do for the pile, either, not playing too far out so that you bridge a huge gap, and then you've got to figure out which other pile you can play those cards on. Or, sometimes you're trying to hint to them, hey, I can jump this one back 10, and then we can play more cards on it. So anyway, it is a super fun game. I think usually takes us half hour to play it. Maybe less, depending on how hard we made the game, right? Because you have more cards in your hand, that makes it easier. If you have to play more cards out of your hand, that makes it harder. And so, you can vary it that way. I think I mentioned last time that I'm putting together the AI Bootcamp. That is going to be at aidevbootcamp.com website. I'm still working on it. I've had to fix some stuff on Top End Devs. So I'm hoping to have that fixed up this week. And there was a website that I wanted to pick, but I can't remember what it is, so I'll pick it next time. Danny, what are your picks?
Yeah. I had 2 picks, and I'd like to sneak in a third one if I have time.
Yeah,
it's also a movie. Yeah, I was just reminded because Dan, you mentioned a movie. I also had a nice movie I just saw. First one is I'll paste it in the chat, is the Open Web Advocacy. This is a group of engineers, web developers. What they do is they provide technical information to regulators, legislators, policymakers to fight the anti-competitive stuff in our industry. For example, with Google and with Apple. They do a lot of research. They publish a lot about this. They get involved to to get rid of all kinds of anti-competitive stuff. The link is there. Great organization. Second one I have is actually one I picked up here is the Web Components compiler project. What's the guy's name? That's from Owen Buckley that you also had in April, I think, on the show.
He also commented on this episode in YouTube, so.
Okay, cool. Because it's really, I'm working with web components. I'm doing a lot of server-side rendering with lit elements, but there was nothing like that for vanilla web components. So I was really happy to see that Owen already built something like this. So I was quite happy with that. I've been using it and it's working quite well to do server-side rendering for vanilla JavaScript web components. And the third one is the movie I just saw. I think I saw it last weekend. It's called The Whale. It's from 2022. I won't give away too much, but it's a very simple movie. It's the whole movie is set like in one room, and I always tend to like these kind of movies. It's about a man, very unhappy man who struggles with obesity. What struck me about this movie is when it came out in 2022 is the main star of it is Brendan Fraser. And I don't know if you know him, but you've probably seen The Mummy and movies in that like he always played in. I always never considered him like a very good actor, but that was basically because of the movies that he played in, like for example, The Mummy. But this is really, really impressive. He plays this very obese guy in a suit, but you can't even tell it's a suit. It's amazing. He won an Oscar for this. Great movie, not a very happy movie, but definitely one I would recommend you to watch. It's called The Whale. So those are my picks.
Yeah, it was Brendan Fraser's comeback movie, I think.
Yeah, it is, and what a comeback it was.
Yeah, I heard good things about it, but I'll have to go watch it.
Yeah, it's really I loved it, and the acting was really impressive.
All right, well, I'm just gonna throw this out here. So besides the what PWA can do today, if people want to contact you, maybe follow you on social media or reach out and say, hey, can you help me with or train me on this stuff? I mean, how do they get hold of you?
Yeah, sure. There's a form, there's a contact form on what PWA can do today where people can reach me. They can find me on X, Danny Moerkerke, just my name. Medium, same thing. I also write there. And I also have a website. It's a bit outdated, dannymoerkerke.com, where people can also find me. So I think X would be the best way to reach me.
Sounds good. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks for coming. This was really great.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it. Absolutely.
All right. Well, until next time, folks, Max out.